Welcome to Breaking Ground. I'm your host, Devin Kolka. On this show, we meet with industry leaders in the construction, design, and real estate industries. Today's guest is Anthony Orso, President of Capital Markets for Newmark. On this episode, we speak with Anthony on the current capital markets state and the New York real estate market. I'm excited to have him. Welcome to the show. I am here with Anthony Orso, President of Capital Market Strategies for Newmark. Thank you for coming in today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
You have a tremendous career. I mean, you founded and were the CEO of Cantor Commercial Real Estate. You now run Capital Market Strategies for Newmark. I've heard of people call you the Godfather. Don't know where it came from, but I love it.
Devin, it's very simple. There's not many real estate people on the finance side that are Italian. So, of course, they call the few of us the Godfathers. It's no big deal.
I love it. So I want to get into your story because you were somebody who really worked hard to get to where you are. Talk about your upbringing real quick.
Very simple. I grew up in Staten Island. My father was a bricklayer and my mother was a seamstress. I didn't think much of school. I cared more about sports than school. And it was a lightning bolt one day. I worked with my dad as a guinea laborer, which means I can move a wheelbarrow of cement at 12 or 13 years old. And at around 16, my father said something very, very profound to me in the summer. He said, if you don't want to work hard at school, it's not a problem. There's always a spot for you on the construction site. And it was as if a lightning bolt struck me down because I thought there is no way I can work on a construction site. I just wasn't tough enough. I don't know how my father did it for 50 years, but I knew I couldn't do it. I went to school that junior year and I said, okay, no messing around. I did pretty well my junior year and my senior year. Thankfully got into a college, did pretty well in college and was lucky enough to get into Columbia Business School. And, so that moment in life really shaped my career and really got me focused on what was important, which was really focusing on things that would get me to a better spot. And thankfully, it's been a good run since.
And when you were at Columbia, did you know what your next step was?
I always believed I didn't belong at Columbia. I went to St. John's undergrad. I was the only person in the 2 years at Columbia that had gone from St. John's, and maybe for a long time before and after. So, my goal was just get out. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to get a job at a bank, chemical bank, in 1990 in the real estate program. And, it was an interesting group. There were 600 people. The market had pretty much died, kind of like it is today. And it was mostly about workouts and restructurings. And I really got into the real estate business at a bad time, a time when people were dealing with pain and problems. And it was that early sort of foundation that gave me a great perspective of what real estate's all about. And it's really all about cycles and understanding how different market dynamics change depending on things that you don't see, like a pandemic, right? Who saw this coming? Mm-hmm. Well, no one saw it coming, but you have to adapt. You have to understand how those markets change, and you have to be one step ahead.
Now, is this about the time where you probably realized I can do this at a very high level?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
My goal was not to get fired.
Okay.
I spent a bunch of years working at a bank hoping not to get fired and hoping that each and every day they'd let me back in the building and my card when I came in would work. So look, you work at these big institutions, and I worked at a lot of banks, and what you realize is the organizations are more important than the people. And what each of these organizations, these are highly regulated places, and real estate doesn't always fit in so easily in big banks. It's a little bit of an island. Most of banks are focused on corporate clients, or they're focused on high net worth clients. Real estate's a weird business. It's an entrepreneurial business. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few businesses that the big entrepreneurs are the ones that are the focus of the business. And, it took me a long time to understand that at a big bank, the goal for big banks is not to make mistakes and not to try to push the limit. So you learn discipline, you learn how to underwrite, you learn how to credit, and you learn how to really interact with other parts of the organization, including, senior management, credit departments, risk managers. And it's that culture and that training that really gave me a great foundation for the rest of my career.
So you end up over at Cantor Fitzgerald and you open up the real estate arm.
Yep.
How do you go into that pitch of why don't you let us do this?
Well, it was 2010. I had spent about 8.5, 9 years at Credit Suisse, where we did about $200 billion in financing. The market had crashed again, very similar to today. I went to Cantor. Cantor hadn't been in real estate. And we really, said you have a great fixed income sales force, which is the backbone of the CMBS business, because in CMBS you make loans, you put them into securitization, you create bonds, and you sell those bonds. Mm-hmm. So the firm had an unbelievable fixed income sales force. We convinced the firm to back us. We raised a bunch of third-party capital. We were making loans in the end of 2010 and early 2011 where really the big banks were on the sideline. So we got there early. And again, timing as it relates to what we did at Cantor was critically important. And very soon thereafter, we became one of the leading non-bank financing companies, mostly because I hired great guys that had worked for me in the past. I created a regional network because I always believe the real estate lending business is a local business. And we had offices in all the big cities. And, it was good timing, hard work, and things worked out for us.
I think Crane's had you number one on the list for financing and fastest growing companies at one point.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. They asked us for a lot of stats, and I had no idea that we'd even be in the top 10. So when number one came out, it was pretty surprising.
Now, has reality hit you at this point where you're realizing that you're doing this at a very high level and you're pretty damn good at it?
Well, what I knew is some of the early things I learned about credit and discipline and sticking to the things you do well really served me well, and my early career I think really played a big part in that. But like everything else, I had great people that I've worked with over the years. I've had great partners. I've had great investors, and good timing. But one of the things that Wall Street is about is really execution and really being there for your clients. And something that I think about every day, if we're there for our clients and we can execute from them, that's how you keep a client. And the way you lose them is not doing that. So it's a very client-centric business. And, I've been lucky enough over the years to put out a lot of money. My kids say, why do so many people like you in real estate? And I said, well, I've had a good job. I give people money. Usually if you give people money, they like you. So I picked the right business, I guess.
Yes, and customer service is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
So you're now, since 2018, you've come to Newmark, and you're the head of the capital market strategies. What is the head of capital market strategies?
So I run the securities business at Newmark. I bought our Fannie and Freddie company at Cantor in 2014, and then we sold it in 2018 into Newmark, which is why I moved over. So that's our Fannie Freddie multifamily finance business. At Newmark, I run the securities business, which is where all of our equity capital markets capital raising is done. It's where today we do a lot of restructuring work for borrowers that are having problems. We continue to build our Fannie and Freddie multifamily business. We're a top 5 multifamily lender. We'll do $11, $12 billion. And I'm part of the overall debt group, which last year did over $30 billion in financing. This year is different. It's changed. The first few months of this year started off pretty exciting. Obviously, March hit and things changed. The market has certainly come back in certain ways. So today in the multifamily business, which is a big part of Newmark's business, in the Southeast and Southwest and parts of the Midwest, it's as if nothing has changed. Fannie and Freddie are doing loans, 10-year fixed rate loans in the mid 2.5% range, and it's as good as it's ever been. However, places like New York City, which have had rent regulation issues, those markets have pretty much stalled. The rest of New York City on the office side, with occupancy being low and retail issues rents going down 40-50%, very challenging. And we're just at if this is a baseball game, people say, what inning are you in? What I've said recently is we're in the batter's box and we're about to start the first inning. And the first inning will start when people start to feel like it's safe again. And we're certainly not there yet. So in New York City, even though it's one of those cities that can never die. And, as I said to you earlier, there's all these articles, is New York City dead? In the Post, Jerry Seinfeld said everything's great in New York City. Of course, he says that as he's at his beach house in the Hamptons, not in his apartment. So who knows when things will get to the first inning. We'll get there soon, I suspect. But that doesn't mean there's not a lasting effect. Whether it's retail or whether it's people reimagining office space and how they're going to use it, who knows? But, the one thing that has happened, which is great, is all the big tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they've taken millions and millions of square feet recently, and they've done it because of all the reasons people love New York. It's got a great talent pool, there's great energy, and at some point, people will be back in the streets, and we will get back there. The question is when.
I'm a believer that New York City, it definitely will come back. And like you said, the question is when. I know that the streets right now are definitely an eerie place. You have a lot of crime. You have they're empty. They really are. But I don't think it's just the vaccination that's going to fix things, and it's going to take a lot of time. At what point does New York City come back, and is it going to come back to the same? Because I don't think it's going to come back the same. I think it's going to be different at the end of the day.
Well, New York City is a big market. There's 400 million square feet of office space in Manhattan. So when people are back, there's safety in numbers. So one of the reasons it feels weird, and I'm in the city approximately 3 days a week since August, it feels weird because there's not many people around. The restaurants are empty. I work near Grand Central, and I called my wife, I think it was 3 months ago, and I said, I'm passing Starbucks at 9:15 in the morning, and there's not a person there. That's pretty weird.
Yes,
right?
very weird.
So when people are back at work and living in their apartments and going out, and there's energy, that will become the beginning of what New York gets to next. And it may be different. Look, there's nothing to say that New York City occupancy rates, whether it's in the multifamily space, in the condo space, office space, and even hotels is going to get to the same level. It doesn't need to be to make New York City a great market. What needs to happen is we need great leadership, and it's not just political leadership, because that's not enough. We need great business leadership in cooperation with political leadership, and people need to feel safe, both from a health standpoint. And I think once we have that, the city will rebound. Look, after 9/11, it felt really weird.
Yeah.
Right? In 2008 and 9, the market had crashed. Lehman Brothers had gone out. Bear Stearns had gone out. It felt weird.
But people were together.
That's a good point.
People were together.
Yeah.
And it was a different time, where right now everybody is very separate, both politically and just in general.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that. And look, hopefully we get back to the point where New Yorkers realize that it does take all of us working together to make it a great city again. And like you, I'm hopeful. It's hard to say when, but at some point we'll get there. And I think real estate has an interesting part of the turnaround, because the great thing about New York City real estate is it gets reimagined. Listen, I remember growing up when the meatpacking district was exactly that, right? And you look at it now, and it was transformed, and so were so many other great neighborhoods. That will continue to happen. The West Side, right, for example, in that whole Chelsea area with the High Line and all that, that's been transformed already. That is just getting going. Obviously, Hudson Yards, right, at the tip of that Chelsea corridor. So, look, it will get reimagined. It will happen again. I'm a big believer that New York City will never be dead. And I think that your comment about all of us working together, that's really what we need to do, both as business leaders and politicians.
I couldn't agree more. Do you think that the government can really spur the comeback, whether that's through incentivizing developers, whether that's through public-private partnerships? Is there something the government can do to really speed up the process?
Look, to me, the best thing the government can do is continue to focus on affordable housing, because if the government can help the continuation of affordable multifamily transactions, both in New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, all of that is what helps young people get attracted to our city. And any city that can continue to attract young people over time will attract the big businesses. The reason the big tech companies have just taken millions of square feet is because that's where the talent is. So to me, if politicians and real estate folks can continue to work on creative ways for affordable housing, that will have a profound long-term effect on the city.
So you talk about affordable. I imagine you guys are putting together financing for some of those deals. How do developers make money in those deals? Is it just the tax credit? Is it, how does that work?
Well, it's certainly tax credits help, and anything that can spawn financing opportunities for affordable makes sense. But I really think it's done smartly. It's done a combination of upzoning. It's done by providing tax incentive credits, which have been done for years. It's I think allowing banks to have incentives to make those kinds of loans. And look, there's been lots of different ways it's been done over the years. I can't say that it's ever been done to the extent it probably needs to be. We're probably short 100,000 affordable units in the city.
Wow.
So every administration talks about it. It's a priority for every administration for the last 20 years, and I think it needs to be an even bigger priority because that's the way really New York City gets out of this in the long run. Continue to attract young people who want to be in the city and can get affordable apartments. That will keep this city vibrant.
So let's switch over to retail. Retail obviously was hurting even before the pandemic took place, and the Amazons of the world they continue to grow. People keep talking about retail is going to come back, but it's going to be all about the experience, and shopping will always be there. People want to get out of their house. People want to get out, but they need to go through an experience. Is that the answer?
Yes, and I think there's a lot of talk about new kinds of real estate on the retail side, and I think that's great. The experiential things are terrific, and there's a handful of those in Manhattan now. But really, to me, I look at it as a mark-to-market. If rents were, $1,000 a foot on Fifth Avenue, maybe the new mark-to-market is $500 a foot, right? But I remember when those rents were $150 a foot. So, as I've been doing this now for over 30 years, markets go up and down, and there's nothing that says that retail rents on Fifth Avenue should always be $1,000 a foot. Maybe the new norm is $250 a foot, $500 a foot, right? Because retailers ultimately have to make money, or they're going to not be there. So, did we have too much retail? Maybe. We certainly had 5 or 6 locations where you can go to the same stores. And, if you just look at Bleecker Street now in Manhattan, 7-8 years ago, it was the new hot street. Today, almost every one of those retailers is closed, right? Is that bad? Well, it's bad in the sense that if you own those properties, but I don't think any of the people that shop at those stores can still find those goods.
Will landlords be able to keep up with their mortgage payment if those rents are cut?
Certainly challenging. Really depends on what happens with property taxes and whether those get adjusted accordingly and fairly, which is certainly an issue. But the markets recover. They always do in New York City and certainly Manhattan. You have an opportunity for people in the suburbs. Whether it's, Long Island, Westchester, Queens, or Connecticut. I know people have moved out of the city, but that doesn't mean they don't want to go back to the city. That doesn't mean they don't still want to go into the city. It still doesn't mean they don't work in the city. So again, it's all about shifts, and, we're in a market now that's a little unusual. I mean, I'm guessing next year will feel a lot like this year because we won't have enough vaccines to really make a difference. But, we will start the year after 2022 perhaps with this in our rearview mirror, and it'll have given retailers and real estate owners 2 years to adjust, whether or not mortgages will be able to be sustained at the levels they were at. Maybe not, but this is not the first time, right? It's not the first time in my career where I've seen mortgage levels not be sustainable. I mean, that's just the ebbs and flows of our business.
Do you believe that there's going to be a mass exodus out of the suburbs back to New York City eventually? And if you're looking at investing in Long Island, is there a concern that be careful because if it comes back, there might be a shift right back to the city?
Yeah, I'm a long-term believer in Long Island. I've been involved in a fair amount of real estate out here. I think particularly Suffolk County has an enormous runway. I think what's happening at Brookhaven National Lab, what's happening at Stony Brook and Cold Spring Harbor Labs, I think what we're going to see as Long Island becomes the next hot spot for development of life sciences and other things. It's already a massive industrial market. I think that will continue. I think the people that have left the city and have moved out to Long Island have done it for the same reasons I originally moved out to Long Island. You have kids, you're looking for more space. Perhaps did that decision get changed a little bit with COVID? Yeah, that's possible. But it's unlikely that people that just bought houses here are moving back. Look, let's face it, Long Island has great proximity to the city. It has great natural resources, beaches and other stuff, and it has great schools. So that's always attracted people to Long Island. That's not going to change. What I think the key is, do young people that live across the country and around the world still want to come to Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, the Bronx? And if that keeps happening, the cycle keeps continuing. And I think Long Island will have proven to be a big winner in all this, but not because of anything other than the same great things Long Island has already had in the past that attracted people.
So I want to wrap this up, but before you go, I do want to talk to sports with you because I know you're a crazy Cowboy fan, and your team is struggling just like mine, the Jets. What's the future going to be for Dak in Dallas, and where are the Cowboys going?
Well, yes, I am a big lifelong Cowboy fan, and it's been a tough year. Dak's obviously been hurt, but I'll throw the question back at you. If the Cowboys offer Dak Prescott and their fourth, fifth, sixth pick in the draft, or whatever it might be, for the opportunity to draft Trevor Lawrence, do you hit that bid?
I don't. I think Trevor Lawrence has more upside. I think Dak has proven himself in the NFL and is a leader, as we've discussed. But I believe that Trevor is going to be a stud. He has the grit, and I'm keeping him. He's my guy.
Fair enough. And I think for most Cowboy fans, we're happy with Dak. We just want to see him on the field.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming today. Always a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.